quality Learing centers, Tim Walz's career is over, Supreme Court decisions, and an update on all things President Trump. All that and more today on The Nathan Hale Show. Well, folks, we are back. It is January 9th, 2026. This is the first episode of Season 4 of The Nathan Hale Show, episode 119. Can you believe that we've been on the show for 119 episodes at this point? It's crazy. It's been over a year in the making. We are back in 2026 with a huge rebrand. Everything looks different. New name, new colors, new branding, new everything, but the same great opinions on this lovely show. You know, I gotta tell you, the decision for the rebrand, it was long, it was hard to come up with, it was hard to decide on it, but I feel like it was the right thing. You know, I do love the spin cycle branding, I really do, but I felt it was time for a change, make the show a little bit more of my own. So you'll see it everywhere. New show, new title, same places you're watching it, and we have a new format. So we're going to try and do this show for about an hour every single Friday night. So you should have something fun to look forward to on Friday, seeing my amazing face on your computer screens or your televisions or wherever the heck you're watching this amazing show. Well, folks, there's been a lot. As you know, I have been MIA since about December 15th. I think December 15th was our last show, and I have just kind of been off the grid. I've been staying away from the news cycle. I've had a lot of lovely time off, but now I am back again for you all, and it's been very refreshing. It's been really nice not being in the thick of things every single week, and but I have missed it at the same time. It's a bittersweet moment right now, but I'm happy to be back. And boy howdy, has a lot happened in the past about month or so. Starting off, Tim Walz's career, man, it has taken an absolute nosedive. So have you all heard of the Quality Learing Centers? That's right, Learing, Learing Centers in Minneapolis. Well, a YouTuber by the name of Nick Shirley basically went in and found out that all of these daycares that were being funded by Minnesota taxpayer dollars were just absolutely fabricated and fake. So I want to read through this story for you. So Minneapolis Quality Learing Center is officially closed, state record show. Now this is just one of the so-called quality. You can literally see the sign on the post right here, Quality Learing Center. Now this is just one of the several fraudulent daycare schemes that was happening in Minnesota. But let me just read through this. So the daycare received $10 million in state funds since 2019. A Minneapolis learning center facing fraud officially shut its doors earlier this week, shortly after it finally fixed its misspelled sign. State records show that the Quality Learning Center's license was closed as of January 6, 2026, following weeks of scrutiny after journalist Nick Shirley featured the center in a video on alleged Somali daycare fraud in Minnesota. The daycare received around $1.9 million from Minnesota's Child Care Assistance Program in 2025, bringing its total state funds up to around $10 million since 2019, according to CNN. Even CNN is covering this story. This is such a big story that a YouTuber broke, guys, that CNN is covering. Even the leftist media can't ignore the amount of fraud, waste, and abuse that was taking place in Minnesota. The center, which misspelled learning on its sign, appeared to be empty when Shirley showed up to ask questions in a video he posted on December 26th. A man who identified himself as the manager of the Quality Learning Center later told reporters that Shirley arrived too early for any children to be present, as the center operates from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. First off, what daycare operates from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m.? What kind of hours is that? It's daycare. Day is in the name, right? You would assume that, normal operating hours for a daycare, I feel like, are probably, 7 a.m. to like 4 p.m. maybe 6 p.m., right? It's where parents take their kids while they're working all day, right? It's during the day, right? What child needs to be in daycare until 10 p.m.? Who's dropping their kids off at 3 p.m. at a daycare? What kind of daycare is this? Quote, kids come to us, clients come to us, their parents come to us, they're here daily, they leave on time, they come on time, there is no fraud going on whatsoever, said Ibrahim Ali, who added that he was born in the United States and is of Somali descent. Okay, so he's an American guy, so don't worry, he's an American. Ali argued that Shirley's video was meant to paint Minnesota's large Somali community in a negative light. I've got a lot to say about the Minnesota Somali community, to be perfectly honest with you, but that has nothing to do with the daycare scheme that was happening here. After Shirley's video went viral, around 20 children were seen going into the Quality Learning Center's building, the New York Post reported. Oh, so they found some kids to start showing up to go in there at 2 p.m., I see. Quote, we've never seen kids go in there until today. That parking lot is empty all the time, and I was under the impression that place is permanently closed, one person told the Post on December 29th. A state official said last month that the Quality Learning Center had already closed down after Shirley's video spread online and in the media, but a spokeswoman for the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families later clarified that the center decided to remain open. 2 weeks later, however, it appears that the owners of the suspicious daycare changed their minds. Along with allegations of fraud, the Quality Learning Center also faces an astonishing number of state violations. The daycare was hit with 121 violations from state inspectors in the past 4 years. 121, folks. 121. That's quite a number. That is almost the same amount of episodes that we have done on this show. We're at 119. They got 121 violations. Look at that. So this article is from the Daily Wire, and they say that they previously reported the 121 violations in 4 years are extraordinarily high for daycares in Minnesota, as the vast majority of daycares in the state received no violations during their annual licensing review, according to a 2020 government report. Well, I should hope that daycares are not receiving a plethora of violations, considering they're taking care of people's children. A state inspection in December of 2022 found that the daycare did not properly keep children's attendance records. In 2024, the center received multiple violations because it lacked children's physical exam and immunization documentation. Well, that seems like you should have that on hand if you're a daycare, right? The fraud alleges threw Minnesota back into the spotlight last month after federal prosecutors charged dozens of people for allegedly defrauding taxpayers and taking money from state welfare programs. That's right. On top of the daycare situation, there was a whole slurry of fraud that was happening within the state welfare programs within Minnesota. Let's not forget about this, folks. Most of the people charged by the feds in the alleged scheme were of Somali descent. The fraud investigations in Minnesota also led to the Trump administration deploying 2,000 federal agents to Minnesota last week. We'll have updates on that, by the way. There's been some action with all that, let me tell you. The city's leftist leaders and residents have protested President Trump's move to target Minnesota in immigration enforcement, and chaos erupted on Wednesday when a woman was shot and killed by an immigration customs enforcement agent after she blocked federal agents with her vehicle and then began to drive towards an agent who was standing in front of her SUV. We'll cover that story in just a minute. Protests continued on Thursday morning following the shooting as demonstrators confronted federal agents outside of an ICE facility. Schools in Minneapolis are closed on Thursday as the city braces for anti-ICE protests. The protests are so bad, folks. The situation in Minnesota... By the way, can I just say, what the heck is happening in Minnesota? It seems like every time there's a huge, massive scandal that involves a protest, it's happening up in Minnesota. I remember this all through the Summer of Love BLM protests that were happening. It just leveled Minnesota. They burned the city to the ground. It's either Minnesota or Portland, I fear, that these protests happen. But the protests are so bad because the people love the waste, fraud, and abuse in their state. They love it so much that they are protesting having it taken away to the point that schools are having to be shut down because their protests are so extreme. Never once have I seen a greater outpouring of people who are anti-following the rules. The entire purpose of ICE going into these cities is to find the people who are cheating, is to find the people who are not abiding by the rules and following our laws, who cut their way into the United States illegally, mind you, who are here breaking our laws actively. We have daycares that are not following our laws. We have government employees that are not following our laws. We have people in our country who are not following our laws. We have so many people not following our laws. I can see why we're sending federal agents to Minneapolis or to Minnesota. It seems like it's a disaster up there right now. Is Minnesota on life support? Anyone who's in Minnesota, tell me, tweet at me, tell me, what is the situation in Minnesota right now? Is it Are we bleeding in Minnesota? Are we on life support? Do we need to send help for you? Minnesota, blink twice if you need help. We're here for you, folks. We're here for you. All right. So, moving right along, Tim Walz's daughter got out on the media circuit to talk about this. So, Tim Walz's firebrand daughter, Hope, admits there is enough truth to Minnesota fraud scandal as she opens up about her dad's decision to drop out of the governor's race. So in other words, Hope says there is in fact no hope. There's no hope for Minnesota, guys. There's no hope for it. It's too far gone. It's so far gone that the governor's own daughter is saying that the fraud is, it just blows my mind. Do you all feel like this is as crazy as I feel like it is? When have you ever seen such apparent illegal mishaps and fraud happening in the state that the children of that elected official are the ones actively coming out and saying, "Oh yeah, the fraud's there, guys. It's there. It's legit. Believe me, guys." All right. So Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's daughter admitted there was enough truth to the alleged billion-dollar fraud scandal plaguing the North Star state, as she opened up about her father's abrupt decision to drop his bid for a third term. That's right, folks. Tim Walz is gone. His career is over because of this. A YouTuber named Nick Shirley single-handedly ended Tim Walz's career. The man who was almost our vice president. We were a heartbeat away from Tim Walz being a heartbeat away from the presidency. And no more. He's gone. Gone. We'll never hear from Tim Walz again, folks. Never again. He will go off and become a university lecturer at some faraway place. They'll bring him out. They'll wheel him out whenever they need someone on the leftist networks talking about how terrible things are. Oh, gosh. All right. So Hope Walz appeared on 1 Hour Detours with host John O'Sullivan just hours after her dad announced he was bowing out of the 2026 governor's race to kind of get that target off of Minnesota. Quote, "I think there was enough truth to the fraud claim," the 25-year-old said. However, she then whined that President Trump and his supporters had twisted and amplified the scandal involving Minnesota's generous social safety net. Estimates vary, but the theft is thought to be at least $1 billion. First Assistant U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson claimed late last night that the fraud could be up to $9 billion or more. $9 billion. Crazy. The fraud was prevalent among Minnesota's Somali population, where people set up bogus nonprofits to get state funding to provide services to the homeless, hungry, and individuals in need of daycare for their children. Hope said her father had taken the brunt of the blame because of his national profile, which ultimately led him to bow out of the race. Quote, "I think he was popular during the campaign last fall, and he's still in office, and he's running again. And so it's just kind of an easy thing for them, Republicans, to pick up on," she told the podcast. Quote, "I think it's because he's everything Trump will never be," she insisted. That's right. Trump will never be Tim Walz. Trump will never be flailing arms Tim Walz. Trump will never sit idly by while the Somali population of the country defrauds a state government for billions of dollars. No, Donald Trump will never be Tim Walz. That's right. And that's a good thing. I'm glad that we have Donald Trump in the White House and not Tim Walz. What a bullet we dodged, folks, with that. You know, this is why Republicans are hesitant whenever we hear about increasing welfare, increasing money for social programs, increasing money for government programs as it is, because we know that there's waste, fraud, and abuse happening within those programs wherever they are. Wherever they are. There's always someone trying to cheat the system and get free money. There's always someone trying to do it. I cannot believe that we sat here while Democrats actively threw Doge into the garbage can. They actively hated on the fact that the federal government was doing an audit, right? They actively were campaigning against doing an audit of our federal programs because they knew that this fraud was in there. They knew this fraud was happening at every level of government. After seeing this, every single state should have a Doge commission. Every single state should be going through line by line of all their state expenses and finding out where that money went to. And certifying that it went to the actual right place. Because here's the thing, folks. Here's the thing. I don't really have an issue with my tax dollars going and feeding the homeless. I don't have an issue with my tax dollars going and funding some of these programs that are helping people out, right? There are genuine homeless people on our streets that need help who, not necessarily are starving, but they need feeding, right? People need to be fed. People need to be housed. People need to be fed. People need some help to get them off the grounds. Now, I think that there should be rules around them. There obviously needs to be a lot more rules after all of this. But in theory, I'm not opposed to it. But when I find out that up to $9 billion of taxpayer money, this is your money, folks. If you're a resident of Minnesota, this is your money. And who knows, it could also be federal money too. All of these states get kickbacks from the federal government. It could be all of our money that was spent, right? Who knows? But if you're, let's just assume this is all Minnesota's money, right? If you're a Minnesota resident, this is your money. This money went to absolutely defrauding the government. It did not go for what it was said to go for. It did not go to help anyone other than these Somali people who lined their pockets with it, who got ahead in life, who got a free handout because of it, right? Who stole your money. And by the way, to anyone saying, right, it actually isn't that much money in the grand scheme of things, I don't care if a single dollar was taken. I've said this ever since the Doge was a thing that was existing on the world. I don't care if there is a single dollar of taxpayer money that was used on fraud. I don't care if it's a single penny. Every single one of our tax dollars needs to be accounted for. It needs to go towards programs that help Americans. It needs to go towards programs that actually make our lives better. Not going to line politicians' pockets, not going to line certain people's pockets, not being stolen, not having our governments defraud it. It needs to go to help people, right? That's the point of government, is to help people, right? At least it should be. And people stood against Doge. Every single state should have Doge in it, right? I don't care if a single dollar was stolen. I don't care if it was $1 billion. I don't care if it was $100 billion. I don't care how much it was. Every single one should be accounted for, right? So I get concerns when I hear that the Pentagon failed, 7 or 8 straight audits or something, some crazy number like that. This is why Republicans get concerned when we hear about government spending, right? This is why we want less spending in general, because we know that there's money that we're spending that's going to bogus things. So why did we even spend it in the first place, right? Wouldn't it have been so much better had we just not spent it at all and saved the taxpayers that money? Insane. All right. Let's take a little break for a moment and let's talk about the Warner Brothers deal that's happening. So, over the past month or so, Netflix has been trying to acquire Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, which owns HBO, it would become like the largest media deal ever acquired. I actually wouldn't be opposed to it. I am subscribed to both Netflix and HBO. I think it would be great. I would love it if they just merged into one thing and I had one subscription. I wish that I wish there was a super subscription out there that I could pay like $40 a month and get all the streaming platform services for myself, right? In the year of our Lord 2026, I miss cable. I am here to say it. I miss cable. I miss when we just had all the channels in one pack and that was it. End of story, right? Everything you want to watch was just right there. I miss it. I miss it. And I wish that we could get back to a situation where I pay one bill and I get to watch anything I want. I'm so sick of this nonsense of, oh, I have to have this subscription, I won't watch this movie, and this subscription, I won't watch this movie. It's not even consistent too, by the way. It's not even consistent too. Because there are Warner Brothers movies on Netflix and Warner Brothers movies on HBO and Warner Brothers movies only on Amazon Prime. It's not even consistent. There is stuff that's spread across a whole bunch of different platforms, ones that these companies don't even own. It hurts my brain. It gives me a headache thinking about it. So Warner Brothers rejects inferior Paramount hostile takeover bid, choosing Netflix. So Paramount swooped in when they heard that Netflix was trying to acquire Warner Brothers and said, no. We are going to take over Warner Brothers, and we are going to do it in a hostile takeover. We don't care if you don't want us. We will acquire Warner Brothers, gosh darn it. We will save Warner Brothers from going to the woke mind virus that is Netflix. We'll save it. That didn't happen. Warner Brothers Discovery has formally rejected the hostile takeover bid from Paramount amid their merger deal with Netflix, dubbing the proposal terms inferior to the Netflix partnership. Quote, your board negotiated a merger with Netflix that maximizes value while mitigating downside risk, and we unanimously believe the Netflix merger is in your best interest. We are focused on advancing the Netflix merger to deliver its compelling value to you, the board wrote in a letter to shareholders Wednesday morning per Variety. The letter further stated that the Paramount offer, quote, is not more favorable than the WBD stakeholders than the Netflix merger, and continues to be inadequate because of the, quote, insufficient value taking into account price and numerous risk cost uncertainties. The decision to reject the bid was said to be unanimous. This was the sixth offer made and rejected by Paramount. The offer is entirely at Paramount's discretion. Paramount can reduce the price, impose new conditions, or walk away entirely at any time prior to its acceptance of the tendered shares, Warner Bros. Said of the proposal. Paramount announced their latest bid days after the Netflix deal was announced in December. Quote, we believe our offer will create a stronger Hollywood. It is in the best interest for the creative community, consumers, and the movie theater industry, Paramount chairman and CEO David Ellison said in a statement at the time, as the Daily Wire previously wrote. President Trump remarked on the Netflix deal in December, saying it, quote, could be a problem from an antitrust standpoint. The president also mentioned being involved in reviewing the deal. The proposed merger has had bipartisan pushback from skeptics who warn it could turn into a nightmare for consumers and creatives. Many critics also worry that it could destroy the theater industry, as rumors persist that Netflix will push for a shorter theatrical release window for major films. Per reports, the timing could be shortened to as little as 17 days, dramatically reducing the industry standard of a 30 to 45-day delay before movies arrive on streaming services. What is going on here? Well, I actually think it's unfortunate that Paramount did not acquire Warner Brothers. That doesn't seem like it's going to happen. If Warner Brothers was acquired by Paramount, I feel that they could be saved from the woke mind virus. My fear is that, Warner Brothers is already kind of a leftist outlet for movies. Their movies are kind of sucking recently. The only things that are not sucking, honestly, coming out of Warner Brothers is some of their HBO originals, right? Some of the originals are actually really, really good. But, the movies that are in the theaters right now, they've all kind of sucked. I mean, the last good movie that I can remember seeing in the movie theater, I didn't even see in the movie theater, but the last good movie that came out recently that I can remember seeing, honestly, was the Fantastic Four. And that was a Disney movie, right? But before that, I mean, it might have been, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. Whenever the last Spider-Man movie came out with Doctor Strange in it, right? That one was solid, right? That and then Fantastic Four, and I can't think of a single movie that has come out between then that I wanted to actively go and see in the theater. I can't think of a single movie that was actually any good, right? They've all kind of been sucky. If Warner Brothers was acquired by Paramount, I think that they could be saved. I really do. I really do. So I think it's unfortunate that they didn't get acquired by Paramount. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm still in favor of things being acquired, though. I hope that these guys can consolidate down so I don't have to think about 10 different subscriptions out there, right? Because I feel like at this point in time, I'm advocating for myself. And myself says I don't want to have 7 subscriptions to different platforms. I want to have 1, maybe 2 max, right? I miss the days when it was just Netflix and nobody else. I even miss the days when it was like Netflix and Disney Plus and nobody else, and that was it. And then all the other ones started popping up out of nowhere, right? I hate it. I hate it. So it's going to be interesting what happens. In terms of this whole thing being an antitrust, right? I feel like I've kind of come around to feeling like I don't really care, right? There's no shot that this is at all a monopoly in any single way. And I really don't see why the government is concerning itself with the private dealings of these companies. If they want to merge together, the shareholders are fine with it, let them do it, right? So there's a difference between an actual outright monopoly being formed and what these government regulations say is antitrust from corporation standpoint, right? We live in a capitalistic country. Let these companies merge together if they want to. I don't care. If I don't like it, I'll stop paying for their subscription. Stuff on Netflix kind of sucky anyways. All right. Enough of that. I'm getting heated. I'm getting heated, right? It's getting hot in here. I've been complaining a lot about Netflix and HBO and Warner Brothers and all this, right? So I'll take a deep breath together. We got some good things to talk about now. All right. Our next story. So Trump wants to ban institutional investors from purchasing single-family homes. President Donald Trump said in a statement on social media that he is moving to ban institutional investors from buying single-family homes and that he wants Congress to codify the ban into law. The president has made easing the housing crisis a goal of his second term, and many have pointed to institutional investors as a large source of the problem. In a post on Truth Social Wednesday, Trump mentioned banning institutional housing purchases and hinted at other solutions to ease the housing crisis. For a very long time, buying and owning a home was considered the pinnacle of the American dream, said Trump. It was the reward for working hard and doing the right thing. But now, because of the record high inflation caused by Joe Biden and the Democrats in Congress, that American dream is increasingly out of reach for far too many people, especially younger Americans, he wrote. Quote, "It is for that reason, and much more, that I am immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes, and I will be calling on Congress to codify it," the president added. Quote, "People live in homes, not corporations." So, here's my feeling. I fear that the president is getting bad advice. Not that I'm against banning institutional home buying, right? From these huge investors like Blackstone, right? Not that I'm against it, but I fear the president is getting bad advice. Here's the thing. These institutional investors, they only own about like 1% of the actual housing stock in the United States, which is a lot, don't get me wrong, but it's 1%, right? 99% is owned by other means. I actually think the bigger threat with institutional owning is rental properties in the United States. They own far more rental properties than they do not private properties. Let me get my words straight. Well, I understand the institutional investors, such as Blackstone, own far more rental properties than they do single-family homes, right? Single-family housing units that they are then buying and basically inflating the price of and then selling, right? The number one reason why single-family homes are going up is just the absolute lack of shortage of housing units in the United States. I have seen reports that the United States needs between 2 and 4 million new housing units to make up for the demand that's needed in the country right now, to actually start to lower prices down, right? We need to have some of the surplus. Another thing that is causing a huge issue across the board is the zoning regulations, the permitting regulations put in place by these local cities, right? There is a huge group of Americans who want to own a home, but only need 2 bedrooms, right? They want to have a 2-bedroom home. And those really haven't existed since about the 1940s, to be perfectly honest with you. There really aren't any 2-bedroom. I mean, can you think of anywhere that has a mass amount of 2-bedroom homes, just right off the top of your head? I can really only think of apartments. You know, there's nowhere that I can think of that I've ever lived that I have seen 2-bedroom homes, right? But Americans, they want to have 2-bedroom detached homes. They want to have these smaller houses that are tighter together where they can still have a little front yard. They still have their own 4 walls around them. They still own the property, so they're getting equity from it. But it's cheaper for them to get into it and afford it versus having to afford a 3 or 4-bedroom home, which are a lot more common, especially in the suburbs, right? And the zoning regulations of these municipalities, of these cities where homes are being built, they don't allow for homes to be built that way. The argument from people like me is, hey, if the people want to have it, let the people have it. Let them decide where they want to live at. We should offer as many options as we can, right? And there's a growing sense of, why don't we buy up some of these city blocks that have, say, maybe 10 3 or 4-bedroom homes on them, you know, in like a downtown city area, and we'll bulldoze them, and we'll put 20 or 30 2-bedroom homes on it, right? We'll double or triple the density of the lot, and suddenly we can offer a whole bunch more homes to people. Stuff like this needs to be done. Cities need to reform their codes. Another thing is, we have tariffs on housing materials right now. We have tariffs, you know, if you want to combat the housing supply, exempt building materials from the tariffs. Allow people to import them in without any tax, right? We need those materials in the United States to build more homes. We can't do it otherwise. So, you know, I think this is a good move by the president. I'm not anti-doing this. I don't see how this is going to solve any sort of housing crisis. The numbers just don't line up for it. So I would like to see, I'd like to see a bigger push by Republicans to get some of those other things I mentioned through and just start building homes. We need to have a whole bunch more homes in this country, and not just 3 and 4-bedroom homes. We need 2-bedroom homes as well. We need smaller houses, right? We need a variety. We need homes that range from tiny houses in the backyard all the way up to 5-bedroom mini mansions, right? We need a nice variety across the board to get more people in the homes. But the fact of the matter is also, like, I feel for younger Americans. I'm one of them. It's hard to afford property now in the United States. It's really, really difficult. You need to be making a certain amount of money really to get that point. It's become very unattainable for a lot of Americans to get to. And I fear for that, because it's important that we are an owner culture, right? We should not be a renter-occupied culture. If you rent something, you don't own it by the very nature of it. And America is a country of owning things. We should own the things that we spend money on. And when we rent things, we just throw our money away, right? You don't get anything from it. You don't get anything from it. You know, I'm looking right now, and a mortgage for a 3-bedroom home in my city is the same price per month as some 2-bedroom apartments. It's crazy. It's crazy. Why a 2-bedroom apartment should ever cost you the same amount of money to live there as a 3-bedroom actual house blows my mind. Now, I understand you take bigger risk when you own versus when you rent, right? But still, mortgages around here, $2,300 a month for a 3-bedroom home. Why any American should be forced to throw away $2,300 for a 2-bedroom apartment every single month blows my mind. Blows my mind. All right. Boy, oh boy. Sorry, I'm very passionate about the whole housing issue in the United States. It's a big thing. I love talking about it. It's part of my full-time job to talk about housing. I went to school for this stuff, guys. I know a little bit about the housing situation in America. All right, so let's move on. So this is a big deal. The Trump administration's new nutrition guidelines target ultra-processed foods, ease up on red meat and saturated fats. The Trump administration is taking aim at ultra-processed foods while reversing long-held U.S. government stances on red meat and saturated fats. Quote, the Trump administration is now updating federal nutrition standards and guidelines to ensure that Americans have the most accurate, data-driven information supported by science and hard facts, not special interest or partisan ideology, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt told reporters. Leavitt said that the guidelines would impact what is served in public schools, what American service members eat, and what food is distributed through government programs. Quote, faulty dietary guidelines of the past stack the deck against healthy eating and food options for everyday American families, which has fueled the chronic disease epidemic and jacked up the healthcare costs of households across the country, Leavitt added. Quote, when these guidelines are followed, Americans will be saving themselves thousands of dollars. If we want to cut healthcare costs in our country, we must become a healthier country. A healthier America will lead to a more affordable America. The Department of Health and Human Services announced the new guidelines with an updated inverted food pyramid. The top of the pyramid, which is now the wider part of the structure, is built on meats, fats, fruits, and vegetables, while those grains are at a narrowing bottom. So here's what the new updated food pyramid looks like, folks. I could not be happier to see this. We turned the food pyramid upside down on its head. We put healthy foods, meats, cheeses. I see avocado in there. I see olive oil in there. I see lettuces, strawberries, blueberries, apples, butter, shrimp, eggs, salmon, yogurt, right? Tuna fish, right? And towards the bottom, I'm seeing things like nuts. The very bottom, I'm seeing whole grains, breads, wheat, all of these things, right? That are very hard for our bodies to process, right? At the very bottom. I could not be happier to see something like this. Our government is putting healthy eating forward. You know, I saw a post on Twitter about this from HHS, and it was showing off the new this exact image of the food pyramid. And one of the comments on the post said something along the lines of, "Is there scientific evidence to support this?" I'm sorry. Is there scientific evidence to support that eating carrots and broccoli and steak and salmon and eggs is better for you than eating bread all day, than eating sugar? Right. By the way, do you see sugar on here at all? I don't see any sugar on here at all. I don't see ice cream on here. I don't see pie on here. I don't see potato chips on here. I don't see a whole lot of things that Americans eat on a regular basis. Entire aisles of the grocery store are missing from this food pyramid. There are entire aisles of the grocery store dedicated towards junk food, towards chips, towards chocolate and candy. Entire aisles wiped out because of this food pyramid. They're just gone. They're non-existent. What I think is unfortunate about this new updated food pyramid, you know, I'm a fan of this. I'm not anti-food pyramid. I love it. Is what is it going to do for everyday Americans? This only changes possibly the eating styles of service members, of public school kids, right? Few other certain groups. What does it do for the broader American people, right? Because here's the thing. I believe that Americans know what are healthy foods and what are unhealthy foods. I kind of believe that the Americans who are following the old food pyramid, they knew that it was on its head, right? The Americans that are out there that are eating ice cream and junk food all day, that haven't eaten a vegetable in God knows how long, I believe they know what they're doing. The Americans who eat fast food every single day, I think they know what they're doing. And I think that if you ask them, they're aware that what they're eating is not healthy for them, that they should be eating better, but they don't, right? And we as Americans who do eat healthy, who already eat vegetables and fruits and stuff on a regular basis, who eat the foods at the top of this pyramid as it is, I think we kind of already know that those are the healthy foods. So what's this really going to do? Well, I don't think the food pyramid itself is going to do anything. What needs to be done at this point is legislation needs to be drafted in Congress that starts to codify healthy eating for Americans. Legislation needs to be passed that gets things like seed oils out of our food supply. Legislation needs to be passed to get things like a lot of junk foods and a lot of artificial ingredients out of our food supply. Legislation needs to be passed that starts labeling foods that are unhealthy as unhealthy. I'll never forget, in France, I believe it is, they put these labels right on the front of every single food item in France. And it ranges from, I think, E to F, or A to F, or A to E, or something like that. And basically, if you're an A food, you're like an apple, right? You're super healthy, you're full of vitamins and nutrients, like you're good for you. Like, you know, if you're an A, you're a carrot, you're broccoli, you're a ground beef, you're a chicken, right? You're these things. And if you're an F or an E, you're like ice cream, right? You're like the worst kind of ice cream you can imagine. You're like junk food filled with seed oils and chemicals and products that no human should be eating, right? That's it. And it puts it around the front of these things. And where it's really helped for these people, from what I understand, is on the cereal boxes. Because Americans love cereal. Cereal's good, right? The issue is that the cereal companies, with their propaganda cereal, have pushed out to the American people that their cereal is healthy for them because there's fruit on the front of the cereal box, right? And Americans don't turn it around and read the ingredients to see that sugar is the first one on there, or see how many grams of added sugar are added to it, right? They don't read things like that. They believe the cereal they're buying is healthy for them. They don't realize all the ingredients in it that are not, right? Versus if you got a label that has to be right smack on the front of that box, every single American see, hey, that cereal right there, that's an F. That is not a healthy cereal for me, and they can see which ones are actually healthy, because there are some out there that are actually good for you, right? There may be a B quality cereal, right? I don't think any cereal could possibly be an A, but they're better for you than an F, that's for sure. So what I'm saying is it's not entirely Americans' fault that they're not eating healthy foods. A lot of times they're being fooled by food manufacturers into believing that the food that they're buying is actually good for them, right? They're just reading the label in the box, you know, no added sugar inside of it. When in reality there is added sugar, it's just through a different form, right? Or they're putting in sugar that is a more concentrated version of it that is so much more addictive than actual cane sugar, right? And they're saying it's healthy for you somehow, right? Well, it's not. It's kind of the whole diet soda phenomenon, where the diet soda is actually not healthy for you. People just believe there because it says diet on the front of it. You're being fooled, right? Americans are being fooled into believing that they're eating healthy when they're actually not. So what I'm saying is this is a great start. I'd love to see Congress take this food pyramid, go into the halls of Congress with it, and start drafting legislation saying, hey, we need more Americans to start eating this way. We're going to start drafting legislation that forces these food manufacturers to be held a little bit more accountable and start producing food in our food supply that is better for Americans. We need to start taking some of these ingredients out of our food supply that are making Americans sick and unhealthy. All right, move on. So the Senate advanced the resolution to block Trump from using military in Venezuela. So a few days ago, Trump executed a beautiful military strike into Venezuela, where we went in, we kidnapped the Venezuelan president. They had no idea we were coming. We just showed up on their front step, burst in the president's house, kidnapped him, brought him back to America. Now he's probably sitting in a jail cell somewhere, right, awaiting his trial. Never seen anything like it before. I've never seen another country just go and burst down the front door of another country's president's mansion, grab him, and get out with it, right? So since then, there has been some speculation of what is going to happen now in Venezuela, who is going to become the new leader to take over, how is that going to work out, what's going to happen, right? There's also been some issues with many members of Congress, including several Republicans, as we've seen here, that America executed what they're wanting to argue is a military strike on another country. It's an invasion similar to Iraq. Afghanistan, right? And in the similar to what happened after 9/11, right? To suggest that the military event that took place in Venezuela just a few days ago is anything similar to our invasions into Middle Eastern countries, I think is entirely ridiculous. There are no American troops on the ground in Venezuela, right? We didn't go in and bomb and bulldoze the place. We went in and operated a very targeted strike to acquire an asset and get out, right? That was the entire mission. It was not to go and westernize a country. It was not to go and bulldoze a country and start a war back, right? We're not trying to go to war with Venezuela. The president knows this. The president's not trying to go to war with Venezuela. Marco Rubio is not trying to go to war with Venezuela. No one's trying to go to war with Venezuela, right? However, some Senate Republicans would like to believe that we are. So 5 Senate Republicans voted on Thursday to advance a bipartisan resolution on the war powers President Trump from using military force against Venezuela, a proposal that, if enacted, would unravel the administration's plans to take control of Venezuela's oil exports. This will never pass. I'm calling it right now, folks. It's not going to pass. Senator Rand Paul, the sponsor of the bipartisan measure, voted with Senators Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Josh Hawley, Todd Young to discharge the resolution of the committee and bring it to the floor. Some are usual suspects. I'm not surprised to see Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins in there, right? Not surprised. A little surprised to see Josh Hawley in there. Josh Hawley, pretty conservative guy. Same thing with Todd Young. A little surprised to see them kind of thrown into the basket. Rand Paul, I'm not surprised. Rand Paul, I feel like he's kind of taking this approach where he's really become anti-Trump, in my opinion. And some things I can get behind him on. Other things I don't know. Rand Paul needs to stay in his lane and get a clean budget passed through. That should be it. And all of Republicans should be on board with that, by the way. A vote to pass the resolution itself is expected next week. The Senate is likely to vote to proceed to a resolution on Monday and spend the rest of the week debating it. The resolution still needs to pass the House, where a similar measure failed in a close vote last month. And it faces a certain veto with Trump. There likely aren't enough votes in either chamber to override Trump, something that requires a 2/3 majority. Even so, Senate passage of the resolution to block further use of military force within or against Venezuela without authorization from Congress is a major symbolic victory for lawmakers alarmed over Trump's threats to project power throughout the Western Hemisphere. Senators in both parties are alarmed Trump will deploy boots on the ground in Venezuela, something the president didn't rule out during a press conference Saturday after the overnight raid to seize Venezuela. President Nicolas Maduro in Caracas. The measure is sponsored by Paul, Senator Democrat leader Chuck Schumer, and Senators Tim Kaine and Adam Schiff, your usual suspects again. So, what are we doing here, folks? I trust the president to make the right decisions. The president's foreign policy has always kind of been a highlight of his administrations, honestly. I was concerned after the bombing in Iran, right? Iran, was it? Iran or Iraq? I can't remember. Iran, I think it was. Pretty sure it was Iran. I was concerned after those bombings that America was going back to war with the Middle East. That didn't happen. We've heard nothing from the Middle East since then. We have felt no nuclear threat from the Middle East since then. I was concerned after I initially heard that we went into Venezuela. I didn't know what had happened yet. Right? I was concerned when I initially heard, but I was more confident this time because I saw what happened when we went in and we bombed those nuclear sites. It was a good move in the long run, right? We've seen no negative implications because of it. The world has become a safer place because of the president. As I said, I was concerned with this action because, hey, this is America going into a sovereign country that we have no jurisdiction to be in and taking their president. Now, is the president a dictator? Absolutely. Was he the legitimate president of Venezuela? Absolutely not. But still, we went in and we stole a foreign leader out of their country, the acting president, we'll call him, right? However, I feel like this will end up being a positive thing. There's been speculation. We don't know a whole lot about what is going to happen to Venezuelan leadership. We don't know how it's going to get resolved, how things are going to get better. We don't really know what's going to happen yet with everything in Venezuela. But I think it'll be a good move. I think it will be. I hope beyond hope that Venezuela becomes a beautiful, prosperous, capitalist country once again, and it becomes a nice place to live in again. I really hope it does. So we'll see. And I'm looking forward to the movie when it comes out, assuming that this is all a success. Because assuming that Venezuela becomes a beautiful, prosperous, capitalist country once again, this will 100% get made into a super awesome movie that features really good-looking action heroes going in, kidnapping the acting president of Venezuela, flying out of there, and then turning Venezuela into this beautiful country again, right? America will be a savior, once again, of Venezuela. Every single Venezuelan will owe America a thank you. Let's go and move on. So Mike Johnson says nobody is talking about military action in Greenland, despite Trump saying it was an option. So we went from military action in Venezuela to military action in Greenland. So Greenland is back in the news again. The president cannot drop Greenland. He loves the thought of owning Greenland for some reason. So Speaker Mike Johnson told The Independent that nobody is talking about military action in Greenland, despite the fact that President Donald Trump's administration has floated the possibility. Johnson spoke to reporters on Wednesday during his weekly press conference when The Independent asked if Congress would need to authorize military action in Greenland. Quote, "We are not at war with Greenland," Johnson said. "We have no intention of being at war with Greenland. We have no reason to be at war with Greenland." Johnson said that there are geopolitical and strategic importance of Greenland. Trump has long had a fixation on the autonomous territory going back to 2019, when his administration discussed purchasing it. Quote, "There's a lot of thoughtful discussion to be had there, and that's what we expect is going to happen," he said. So all this stuff about military action and all that, I don't even think it's a possibility. I don't think anybody's seriously considering that, and in the Congress, we're certainly not. The leftists are flipping on left and right about Greenland. They think that we're going to invade Greenland. Greenland is not going to get invaded. For the love of God, I don't know why Donald Trump is so obsessed with wanting to conquer Greenland. The current treaties that are in place basically allow the United States to have whatever military base we want in Greenland as it is. If we conquered Greenland and turned it into a territory, then we're going to have the same discussion that we have with the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico about turning them into states. Same thing with Washington, D.C. I don't want Greenland to be a state. I'm happy with 50 states. Let's cap it right there. We don't need any more states in this country. We already got plenty of them, right? But you know that if Greenland becomes a part of the United States, it's going to be lumped into the same basket as the rest of them, and we're going to have to hear about for perpetuity every so often about why Greenland deserves to be a state, why Greenland needs to be a state, blah, 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 all this, right? Like I said, I don't know why. I'm not opposed to the United States necessarily purchasing Greenland, but Greenland would never sell. And Denmark, I'm not even entirely certain that Denmark would have the authority to sell Greenland. I'm not even sure if they had a referendum, the Greenlandic government would allow a sale of the country. Like, I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. I would bet so much money that we will never own Greenland. All right. So I do want to talk about Star Wars for a second. So I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and this got me kind of excited. So as we all know, Star Wars has been thrown into the crapper for the past few years. Star Wars, under the leadership of Kathleen Kennedy, has been so absolutely sucky, right? The sequel saga, sucky. A lot of the TV shows, sucky. A lot of the moves coming out of Star Wars have been kind of sucky. The only thing not sucky about Star Wars has been Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni, who started Star Wars Clone Wars, who started The Mandalorian, who started the Ahsoka show, seems to be on the verge of taking over Star Wars as a whole. Thank God. Because all Kathleen Kennedy has done is put chicks in things and made them gay. That's all Kathleen Kennedy's done, right? She was even made fun of in a South Park episode for doing exactly that. So a major Star Wars power shift is upon us, but Dave Filoni has the force to pull it off. After 13 years as Lucasfilm's president, it was only a matter of time before Kathleen Kennedy handed over the reins of Star Wars. Thank God. Under the legendary producer whose resume includes E.T., The Goonies, Back to the Future, The Sixth Sense, to name a few, Lucasfilm released 5 Star Wars feature films. From Rogue One to the sequel trilogy, as well as many live-action animated series airing on Disney+. That's not including several others set to release sometime in the future. Her tenure would wrap up The Mandalorian and Grogu, and the next year Star Wars Starfighter. That's right, Rogue One has been the only non-sucky movie that has come out of Lucasfilm since they were acquired by Disney. The only non-sucky one. Rogue One genuinely might be my favorite Star Wars movie. I know I'm going to get hate when I say that. It's certainly in my top 2 or 3, I must say. It kind of goes back and forth. I really love Revenge of the Sith. I really love Rogue One. I really love Return of the Jedi, right? Empire Strikes Back, all those ones, right? Those are kind of like my top 4 right there. Rogue One I love, though. So rumors about who would replace Kennedy, however, have been circulating since Lucasfilm's president departed for 4 years now. Since Lucasfilm's president's departure for years now. But according to Matthew Filoni of Puck News, the move is finally happening. Kennedy's reported replacements are Dave Filoni and, forgive my pronunciation, Lywin Brenna. In the next week or 2, Disney will finally confirm what we've all known for months. Kathleen Kennedy is indeed stepping down as Lucasfilm's president, thank God. And Dave Filoni, currently the chief creative officer of the Star Wars unit, will elevate into the top, Filoni writes. Filoni, who will be reportedly joined by Lywin Brenna, current president and general manager of Lucasfilm Business. However, for the foreseeable future, Filoni is said to be the decider of the creative direction of the franchise in film, television, and any other platforms in the galaxy. Filoni stepping up to the charge of Star Wars is no real surprise. The chief creative officer has long been credited as Lucas's protege, and the two worked together since 2005. Lucas and Filoni created the 2008 animated series Star Wars Clone Wars, and Filoni followed up with the fan favorite series Rebels. When Lucas moved on after selling Star Wars to Disney in 2012, Filoni remained a key player with Lucasfilm. I'm so excited for this. I love Star Wars so much. And I love it when they're not sucky. Star Wars deserves not be sucky, is all I'm saying, right? And I think Dave Filoni will make Star Wars not sucky anymore. He's had a great track record with all the other things that he has done with Star Wars, and I'm excited to see what happens in the future. I'm genuinely excited to see the Mandalorian movie. I hope it's solid. I don't think I will be seeing it in theaters, I must say. The Star Wars has not won me back far enough for me to go out to the theaters yet. However, I will watch it when it comes to streaming, and if it's solid, I may be in the theaters for the next movie. We'll see. All right. We got to talk about the Supreme Court now. So, Supreme Court is going to be having a decision on Friday whether to hear a really important ruling that could potentially happen. So, Bayer and Monsanto legislation to stop lawsuits from failing to disclose product hazards stalls in-house. So, chemical manufacturers may have suffered a short-lived setback in their quest for statutory immunity from lawsuits due to their failure to warn those harmed by their products. But their campaign in Congress, state legislatures across the country, and the U.S. Supreme Court is continuing. On Monday, January 6th, it was announced that a provision denying people the right to sue chemical companies for non-disclosure of product hazards had been dropped from the FY 2026 funding bill in the U.S. House of Representatives. This summer, a provision passed by the House Appropriations Committee would have denied farmers, farm workers, landscapers, gardeners, and consumers generally the right to sue companies that do not disclose on their product labels and in marketing information potential hazards associated with their product's use. Quote, with the announcement that appropriations legislation moving through Congress does not contain a provision that would shield chemical manufacturers from lawsuits for their failure to warn those harmed by their products, we stress that the industry's campaign to escape accountability is proceeding with a fierce determination, said Jay Feldman, executive director of Beyond Pesticides. So, the chemical industry, spearheaded by the chemical giant Bayer Monsanto, in the last year has waged an all-out, multi-pronged campaign in the courts, Congress, and state legislatures to quash lawsuits by those who have been harmed but not warned about hazards associated with pesticide products. Over the last several years, Bayer Monsanto has been held to account for its failure to warn those harmed by their products, with over $10 billion in jury verdicts and settlements in cases involving its weed killer Roundup, glyphosate, after an intentional agency for research on cancer determined that glyphosate is probably carcinogenic to humans. In 2015, the EPA maintained its position that the weed killer is not carcinogenic, and in 2019 refused to approve a cancer label warning. U.S. Representative Chili Pinger, a Democrat from Maine, ranking member of the House Appropriations, Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies Subcommittee, who's leading the charge against the industry bill language, said, quote, "For too long, powerful chemical companies like Bayer have spent billions lobbying Congress to override the voice of the states, towns, and families who are simply trying to protect their health. Despite their relentless efforts and thanks to immense public pressure, we successfully stripped the industry-backed pesticides preemption rider, Section 453, from the final Interior and Environmental Funding Bill." Well, thank goodness for that. Let me tell you, glyphosate is sprayed on almost all soy products in the United States. I do not eat soy at all for this reason. I do not eat a single soy product. I will not put any amount of soy into my body because I know it is sprayed with glyphosate. Almost all soy in America is sprayed with glyphosate, and there's no way to know if it has been or not based on the product labels, right? I won't eat it all. Go look it up and see. It's insane. And it absolutely does cause cancer. It totally does. Bayer and Monsanto, I believe, put out false science to the EPA that said that it didn't cause cancer, when in reality it totally did. And the EPA is still basing its restrictions on the company based on phony science. I highly suggest you go and look up. It's a whole long story. I'm just reading what I have here in front of me. So there's been a push in the U.S. Supreme Court. So in an amicus brief published on December 1st, the Office of the Solicitor General and the White House are calling on the U.S. Supreme Court to grant certiorari. I don't know how to pronounce that word. I've never seen that word before. It's some legal word, let me tell you. So on Bayer's petition to shield chemical companies that fail to warn people about the potential hazards of their pesticide products. The SG argues that the pesticide product label is totally controlled by the federal government and that the chemical manufacturers, in compliance with the EPA pesticide registration process, cannot be held to any other presumably more stringent standard. The Supreme Court is expected to decide the hearing the case next week. So my understanding is that Friday they will decide if they're hearing it or not. This is going to be a big deal, because based on the Supreme Court's decisions, we're going to hear if these chemical companies are allowed to basically get away with causing people to have birth defects and cancers because of their products. And this does not just affect Bayer and Monsanto, by the way. This affects over 1,000 other products out there in the market. This is similar to the legislation that was put in place a few decades ago that basically exempts pharmaceutical companies from being sued over their vaccines, which is entirely insane. I think it's entirely ridiculous that we allow companies to not be sued for their products, right? And the contention amongst critics of this is not necessarily that they need to put labels on their products that say that they cause cancer, right? That certainly is something that needs to be done. The contention more so is with, hey, if I was harmed by Roundup, Monsanto, I should be able to sue you for that harm that was caused by me, right? It's insane. It's absolutely insane. These chemical and pharmaceutical companies have gotten away with so much in the United States. We need huge reform for these companies. And I just feel like our government is not taking it seriously enough. We just get little minuscule lawsuits like this every now and then that's helped clean up things. So I hope the Supreme Court hears this case, and I hope they rule to allow people like you and I to hold these chemical companies responsible for their crimes. All right. We're back to Minnesota, folks. I gotta take a drink of water. So, violent agitator who tried to run over ICE agents in Minneapolis fatally shot by feds, DHS says. So we talked about this earlier in the show, at the top of the show. So a violent agitator attempted to run over federal immigration agents in Minneapolis on Wednesday before she was fatally shot by an immigration customs enforcement officer, the Department of Homeland Security said. The streets of Minneapolis descended into chaos as anti-ICE demonstrators attempted to block federal authorities from conducting immigration raids in the area. One of the protesters then allegedly weaponized her vehicle and tried to plow over agents with her car in an attempt to kill them, DHS said. An ICE officer who was fearing for his life fired defensive shots at the female agitator who succumbed to her injuries, according to the agency. One federal law enforcement source told the Daily Wire that the woman took a bullet to the face. Video has since surfaced appearing to show the officers approaching the woman and asking her to get out of her car. She then backs up the car and attempts to drive away before an officer standing in front of the car fires multiple shots into the vehicle. Quote, "This is the direct consequence of constant attacks and demonstrations by our officers, by sanctuary politicians who fuel and encourage rampant assaults on our law enforcement, who are facing a 1,300% increase in assaults against them and an 8,000% increase in death threats," the agency said on X. Demonstrators further clashed with federal agents and were seen throwing snowballs at them as they attempted to block their operations, according to Fox 9. The agents responded by deploying what appeared to be chemical agents to control the angry mob. Now look, I've seen the video. I'm sure you all have seen the video. I highly encourage you to go and watch it yourself. It's a tough one, I gotta tell you. In my opinion, I see a woman trying to run over a federal agent and him firing his weapon as self-defense. Now, could he have dived out of the way of the car and avoided having someone lose their life? Probably. But it's tough to say, right? It's tough to say when you're in that situation what you would do as a federal agent who's about to get run over by a vehicle, right? It's tough to say. So, obviously, this is going to go to court. I'm sure it will. I'm interested to see what will come of this. I feel like we're going to have George Floyd all over again. I feel like we're going to have another Summer of Love in 2026, and this woman's face is going to get used as the rallying call for leftists nationwide to have huge protests. Now, obviously, BLM won't be able to get involved because she wasn't black, from what I understand. But I'm sure some other organization will get involved. It is possible that we might finally have a White Lives Matter movement start in the United States. White people against gun crime from federal agents. Who knows? We will just have to wait and see. But I have a hard time respecting the leftists out there on the internet who are suddenly having an issue with someone being killed when they laughed at Donald Trump, when they laughed at Charlie Kirk, when they laughed the second time at Donald Trump, when they laughed at so many other incidents of violence happening in our country. And now suddenly I'm supposed to believe that they have sympathy for someone, right? It's just the double standard insane. And let me be clear. I don't think anyone deserves to get killed, right? I really don't. I'm a pro-life person through and through. I feel for this woman. I feel for her family, right? Should she have been out there in the first place? Should she have just listened to the federal agents? Absolutely, right? Federal agents knocking on your door, just listen to them, right? It is better for you to go along with what they say than try and stand up against them and end up getting shot, right? That's just my perspective. So it is entirely unfortunate that this happened. I feel for her, for her family, for everyone involved in this. I feel for the federal agent because now he is going to have to live the rest of his life knowing that he took the life of another person. I'm sure that is not easy either. Let's have some sympathy here for everyone involved in this. And him and his family are going to get thrown and bashed in the media now for the foreseeable future because of this. I'm sure of it. But that's all I have to say about that. All right, we got 2 more things to talk about, then we'll have everything nice and wrapped up. So, Speaker Mike Johnson has set a date for Trump's State of the Union. It will be on February 24th. The Speaker has sent out a formal invitation to the President to welcome him in to give a State of the Union address. Very excited to see what Trump has to say in that. And finally, I want to look at the betting markets because obviously 2026 is an election year. Right now, Democrats are looking pretty good in the betting markets of winning the midterms. I am not entirely convinced that Republicans are going to be able to pull off keeping a majority in Congress. And if you're a Republican, you have got to get out and vote for your Republican representatives because let's be clear. If you like what the Trump administration has been doing, if Democrats have control of even one chamber of the House or the Senate, the Trump administration effectively comes to a halt, right? The next 3 years, nothing happens. The next 2 years, nothing happens, right? No major legislation is going to get through. Democrats are going to sit on everything. I think the Senate is probably safely in the hands of Republicans, which is good. If Supreme Court justices retire, it should be pretty easy to get more conservatives on the Supreme Court and keep that majority. But losing the House is going to be a big issue, right? I do not want to see Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker of the House. I don't want to see it. Don't let it happen, guys, right? Get out and vote, right? We need to have a huge movement for conservatives to really get out and vote in the same way they did in 2024. I really hope Trump gets out there. He starts campaigning with these guys. We need to get the same amount of momentum going that we had in 2023 and 2024 for that election that we do now, right? We need to have several solid years of Republican leadership to really turn things around in the United States. But with that, folks, that's all I got to say. That's all I got. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Nathan Hale Show, the very first one of 2026 with our new branding. We had a great time putting it together for you all. Make sure you share the show with your friends. Like the show, comment down below, tweet at me on Twitter. Let me know what you think of the new show, the new format and everything. Do you like the length? Do we want to go back to being a little bit shorter? Do you like that we did about an hour today? That's all I got for you all. Hope you enjoyed it. I will see you all next Friday. Have a great rest of your week, and I look forward to hearing more from you all on Twitter. Peace out. Bye.